everyone. We are here with Martha Bejar. Mrs. Bejar, thank you so much for being here today. Just to start things off, we are going to give a short introduction about you and your work. So Mrs. Bejar studied at Miami University, Nova Southeastern University, and the Harvard Business School.
She is now on the board of many companies, including CenturyLink and Quadient, and she also co-founded the Red Bison Advisory Group. We are so glad that you are joining us today, Mrs. Bejar. And so to begin our interview, I just wanted to ask what helped you become interested in engineering and business? Why did you choose that path?
Sure. First of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to be with both of you here. I grew up in an environment where my mother was always very forward-leaning when it came to education. And she always said to my brothers and to me, you know, study engineering or become a doctor or become a lawyer. Other than that, I will kill you. So the options were not many. But I chose engineering because I felt that the sciences, the mathematics, the technology, the mathematics and the technology behind it was just a great foundation to do anything I wanted to in my life. And it was challenging and it was hard, and that was part of the attraction, but it also combines a lot of the facts of life. So I thought, yeah, this is a great foundation for me to do anything I want. And so engineering was just absolutely perfect.
And I think also, because you said like you can go anywhere with that background, you know, the more opportunities that we're creating for women, the more things that they can do. And I think it's so important. We've talked about this in our other interviews too, to really show that those endless choices that you have with like a scientific background. And so the next question that we have is, can you talk more about your current projects and companies that you're working with? Also, any past ones that you want to discuss.
So like I mentioned, my background is engineering, and once I graduated from engineering school and I was super young, I started to work in the telecommunications industry, and I fell in love with telecommunications because it does something that is so fundamental: communications. It builds an infrastructure so that you and I can have this call. And so people can educate and people can hopefully solve problems through all of these systems that sometimes we even take for granted. So I was really lucky to end in a telecommunications company. At that time was AT&T. And with my work with AT&T, I started to progress and became very involved in designing of networks and managing people. And that has led me to a career that has been in technology and software and really building bridges between individuals and between companies and between countries. And so all of my focus has been around that. The boards that I sit on today are boards that have to do with technology, and so Quadient, we do logistics and software as a service, connecting small and medium enterprises and running their businesses for them. With Commvault, there's so much data in this world. We take all that data and we secure it and protect it for enterprises. And CenturyLink, we have over 5 million miles of fiber that connects everyone, and most of the internet rights through CenturyLink networks. And then I sit on the board of Sportsman's Warehouse, which is a retail sporting goods company. And we reach into the consumers and we make the outdoors a memorable experience for our customers. So by design, I've always wanted to work in software and technology, and my projects are around that. Now with Red Bison Advisory Group, we try to reach beyond the United States, and we take very hard problems that we have with China, for example, and try to find ways of bringing our countries together. Not so much for me, because I'm already old, but for you guys, so that this is just a better world for everyone. We've got to figure out how to work with China, and hopefully Red Bison is doing a little bit of that.
I love that piece of trying to connect our different communities together, and I think technology has that capacity. So thank you for sharing that with all of our listeners. I know you said a bit earlier, you talked about your mother and her instilling in you the importance of education and that you can go on and be in all these professional roles growing up. So I guess my question for you is just, can you tell us a bit more about your background and your family and kind of how that shaped the way you grew up and who you are today?
Yes, and something that I'm very proud of. My heritage is Cuban. I grew up in Miami, along with the 1 million Cubans that came to our great country in the 60s. And these Cubans, when they left Cuba, they left everything behind. And the Cuban government did not allow them to take absolutely anything. And so they came to the United States. In our case, we came to Miami, and we were starting from scratch. I mentioned that I'm the youngest of four. I have three older brothers. I want to say that they're spoiled. They are spoiled. I know they don't feel that way, but they are spoiled. And my mother and my dad, and my mother was very young. My father was young too. He had a heart condition and had a massive heart attack, and he passed away. So we grew up with a single mom that was optimistic. She was hopeful. She felt that we were very blessed because we were in our great country. So we, in essence, were born with a silver spoon because we had the opportunity to do anything that we wanted to. And it was very clear in her mind that for us to have a life where we could affect change, we had to have a very strong education. And my brothers and I, we never worked. We were focused on getting educated. My oldest brother is a PhD in civil engineering. My second brother is an architect. The third one is an electrical engineer that went to medical school and became a nephrologist. So I'm truly the underachiever when you look at these three great men. But my mother was very driven, and she said, there's no excuses here. We're not victims. It's really us responsible for our lives and responsible for making a difference in this world. And, go for it. There's no limitations to what you can do. And it's great to grow up in an environment like that because it's an environment that is filled with hope and that is filled with possibilities. Even when things are hard, they're not hard enough, and there's always a way out. If you're in a box, you got to invent your way out of that box, and that's exactly what she did with us, for us to achieve our potential, what was possible for us to do. And so grew up in Miami, and then from there I married my high school sweetheart, who's also an engineer. And we have two boys, I mean boys, but 19 and 16. They're not that little anymore. And hopefully we're instilling in them the same purpose of studying, of reaching for their dreams and letting others stand in their shoulders and extending that hand. We have two hands, one for us and one for us to extend others to also reach their potential. So now we live in a beautiful part of our country, God's country, the great Northwest. But our roots are in Miami.
Yeah, I think that topic of work ethic, obviously you are on so many boards and doing so much. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that work ethic and how you continue to take on so much and be such a successful woman in your field, especially as you, like I said, are female and an immigrant. How did that propel your work ethic, and how do you continue to do so many things?
You know, Kate, I think that ethic was instilled by my mother and my brothers, that upbringing of being resilient and being curious and being resourceful, because we didn't have much. And so, you know, that's the foundation. And then that coupled with the importance of education and doing something meaningful in life that can make this world a better world, a little bit altruistic, but very much part of our hearts and what's in our core, in the way that we grew up. I chose a field that for my generation was a male-dominated field in technology and telecommunications and engineering. And I was often the only woman in the group. And with that comes some opportunities and some challenges as well. And what's important is you've got to listen to that inner voice, and you've got to be true to yourself. What you feel in your heart and what you do has to be in sync. And sometimes you have these external pressures, but your inner voice is telling you one thing. And you've got to be confident, and you've got to push forward who you are and your agenda. And that's super important, especially for us girls that are choosing fields that we tend to be the minority. But it also gives us opportunities to really drive the importance of diversity with a purpose, and the importance of thinking differently, and the importance of managing problems in a different way than what somebody else would. I think that combination of diversity and that combination of having an open mind is something that we need in business, and something that we need very much in our personal lives. So pushing that is important.
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly, and that's very powerful. You know, starting with nothing, and all you have is your own work. You don't have people working for your progression. You have to work for it for yourself. That's really empowering. And so I think that also comes to play with, you know, being one of the only women in the workforce that you're entering. And so just wondering if you could tell us more about what it has been like being the only woman in project or companies. Have you always felt that your voice has been heard, and that your voice and your opinion holds as much weight as your male counterparts?
So I think it's been, for me, I've always felt, I never felt that I was being minimized, you know, if you will, because I didn't allow for that. I have a voice, and even when someone would try to mute it, it's impossible. I mean, I could be very chatty, but in addition to that, I feel that given my preparation and my discipline and my focus, that my opinion is very relevant. And so, you know, what I would say is that you will have circumstances where you feel that someone is trying to mute your voice, and it can only be muted if you allow them to mute your voice. You have an opinion, and you have to be confident. And you have to drive the agenda forward, because that is important. In a field like ours, that again we tend to be that minority, somebody will cross the line, somebody will be disrespectful, and you have a responsibility, which is to call it out and not let them anyone walk over you or minimize your effort. Because because you have a voice, and because you have the preparation to really work in collaboration to do something that is great. And so it's important that you be confident, that you're confident in what you do, and that you push that agenda forward.
So I guess my next question for you is a bit more of a loaded question, so I'm sure you don't have to have all the answers to this, but I guess just as young girls, Why do you think that we have this lack of representation, especially in the high-tech industry? And how can we support each other and really make sure that we are increasing representation and bringing more women into this field?
That's such a great question, Kate, because, I'll tell you a little story. In the companies that I've been associated with, not as an independent director, but also as a manager of the company, 50% of the engineers that we hire are women. So, I mean, that's a big number. But then as they continue to progress in the company, that 50%, when they become a senior manager, maybe drops to 30%. And then when they become a vice president, drops to 14%. And when they become a president or a CEO, drops to single digits. A lot of that is within the institution. And so we have to continue working within our companies to create platforms so that men and women can find their balance. And balance is very personal. What might seem like a balanced life to me might not be a balanced life to you. But companies have a responsibility to create programs and platforms to give women and men that balance. So a lot of that is institutional biases that we have to continue breaking through, but a lot of it is our own self-imposed biases. A lot of times when I've managed large organizations, the women in the organization say to me, Martha, I don't want to be you. I don't want to be on the road all the time. And they actually pull themselves out of the pool of resources that continue to progress in companies. But that's also partly because there's those institutional barriers that we have to break through so that women feel that they can progress and they can reach their fullest potential without having to step back because they decided to have a family, for example. It should not have to be one or the other, but we should give them the options to work within their vision and their dreams. And I think that's very important. So part of what I'm trying to do is create that awareness and work with the women and men within the companies that I'm associated with to break those barriers and those biases so that women can continue to seek their dreams and also be mothers or not. I mean, these are choices we have as women. We can get married, not get married, have a family, not have a family, and not be judged or looked at differently. So many times I sat in meetings early on in my career when I was already managing organizations where my male counterparts would say, you know what, let's not give that job to Mary because she has a family and she's not going to be able to manage that. That's not up to him or her to decide. Mary is the one that should be making that decision. And so we've got to continue breaking those barriers and allowing women to grow and reach their potential within engineering or technology or the medical field or as lawyers. It's important for us to continue breaking those barriers. It's a fair thing to do.
And I fully agree that this sort of sense of biases that we hold to ourselves, we might not even know that we have these until they're put into work. But I'm also curious about if you have ever throughout your career, and especially towards the beginning of your career, have you felt these biases maybe that have tried to hold you back, or just in general, have you felt these kinds of interactions with people in your workforce?
So the answer is yes, but let me just take a pause for a minute. I grew up in an environment, I mentioned I had 3 older brothers. I never felt that there was a difference between my brothers and I, other than a physical difference. They were a lot stronger than I was. They would pin me down and tickle me, and I couldn't do anything about it because they were so much stronger. And I remember complaining to my mom about that, and she said that to me. She said, intellectually, you can do anything you want to. Physically with your brothers, when I'm not around, you're gonna have to figure that out. And she actually got me a little dog. I named him Jack. And when my brothers would start tickling me or pinning me down, because I was the youngest and I was smaller, I would say to Jack, Jack, sick him. And the dog would be like a rabid animal and would bite them. And I quite kind of, use that to my defense. Fast forward, now I'm working in environments that are male dominated. And yeah, I started in a very technical field and I was doing research and development and engineering. I wanted to get into sales and managing business. And I actually had a manager in one of the companies that I worked at that the market was not ready for a woman to be in sales in Latin America, for example. And it was the first time that I thought, my gosh, I'm being looked at differently. And because I couldn't move my agenda in terms of what I felt was important for me and my career growth, I actually left that company and ended up managing Latin America and the Caribbean as a general manager for a different company. And we sold that company, and 2 years later, the company that had said no to me brought me back as an executive vice president. And so I came back with a much bigger role. And so, the message there is that if someone does stand in your way, then you need to figure a different thing. You need to do something else because this is, at the end of the day, this is your life. This is not somebody else's life. And if you're serious about it, if it's something you want to do and someone is a roadblock, then you've got to leave. You've got to find a different avenue to get to where you want to get to and learn from that. Because at the end of the day, I look at both of you and this is what I think about. Maybe one of you will be my lawyer or will be my doctor one day. My job is to pave that road for that to happen. When I managed organizations, I always thought of my colleagues and those that work for me as maybe one day I'll work for them. And that's a great reward for being their manager today, that I end up working for them. I know I've done a great job. And not everyone thinks that way. And so, when someone stands in the way of your progress and your curiosity, then you need to figure a different avenue for you to attain your dreams, to do what you want to do with your life. So it happens and it will happen to you guys, and you'll need to figure out how to get out of that tight box, and it's to invent a way out because it's your life.
Yeah, and I think that really ties into the next question that we had for you surrounding mentorship. So as you are so successful, I'm sure, you've become a mentor to Nicole and I. So really, you are a mentor, I'm sure, to so many. But can you talk a little bit about maybe some mentors that you've had, and then give some advice about how girls can try to develop relationships with different mentors and the importance of having that relationship?
And mentorships are super, super important. And what I would say is that you want to have mentors that are outside of your comfort zone because they will have brilliant ideas for you. And I always sought out to do that. And my mentors were a mix of men and women of diverse backgrounds that thought very differently than I thought from my upbringing. And so, I will say that in this great program that you guys are putting forward, to really encourage the girls to seek out and have these mentorships, these relationships with mentors that are different than the way that you think. Because, that difference of opinion does help you have a broader view and help you look at some of the challenges that we're having in our country today, whether it is on the diversity and inclusiveness and the importance of that social debate that we continue to have in our country. That diversity of thought will be important for you guys to really do something that is meaningful and be open to different opinions without really judging or closing the narrative or the debate because there's someone thinks differently. Just embracing that is key, and not judging is absolutely key, and understanding is key. That communication, and going back to why I love the field that I'm in, the lack of communication fosters mistrust. And so opening that view, even when someone thinks very differently than you, and embracing that is absolutely key, especially as we come up to elections now in November, and just being receptive, respectfully, is the way to go. The last comment that I will say, Kate, is that us women, our skills, our strengths are different than the guys, and that's great. And we complement. We tend to be a lot more open, a lot more empathetic, a lot more. Our emotional quotient is high. As we look at solving problems, and I think we have to capitalize from that strength. But the guys complement us, and so. Let's just continue to try to be open and conversive about what's going on in the current environment, and promoting with the girls the importance of mentorship from all walks of life, not just someone that thinks and looks like you.
And I think I just want to touch on one thing that you said, because I think the role of a mentor is to teach you. You can't really learn that much from somebody who shares so many of the same thoughts and experiences. And so I think that, diversity of leaders in your life is so important, because, without that, you're only going to be learning one thing. And especially if they're very similar to who you are, then you don't have much left to learn. So I think, especially in mentorship, that's very important.
Nicole, that's a great point. But in a relationship with a mentor is actually two ways. I learn a lot from you guys as well, and so there's always has to be that balance. You never want to feel that you're taking more than what you're giving. I know we don't keep score, but there is that balance in the relationship between a mentor and a mentee, because both equally really do learn a lot from each other.
That makes a lot of sense. And so if we can just wrap it up with the last question here, just in general, any final advice for young females who would like to pursue business and engineering, if you have any you'd like to add?
I hope that you do pursue careers in the STEM programs, in science or technology, engineering, mathematics, and that you couple that with business, because you will be making a very big difference in this amazing and crazy world where we need a lot of diversity and a lot of power from women that are very talented. I feel strongly that if we have a lot more women in leadership, that we will have just a much more peaceful world, because of what we bring, and because of the way that we approach problems and the way that we solve problems. So I would say be unafraid and go for it. It's a beautiful field to be part of. Engineering, of course, I hold very close to my heart, or computer science, or mathematics, or the sciences, medicine, with a lot more leadership, female leadership in these STEM programs. I think we're going to have a much more wholesome world to embrace. So please, 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 go for it.